Welcome to Business Class, a podcast for people wanting to upgrade their thinking, upgrade their learning, and upgrade their life. I'm your host, Eugenia Panderhos, founder of Business Class Collective, best-selling author, and life coach. If you're an entrepreneur, a startup, or someone who dreams of reaching their full potential, then you're in the right place. You'll feel empowered and inspired to design the life you've always wanted. Let's do this. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled that you're joining me once again, and I'm equally thrilled to be presenting Dr. Adam Fletcher. Adam is a highly regarded, internationally known and respected scientist and researcher in the area of sleep and fatigue risk management, and he is a thought leader and a student of life. He's worked with high-profile companies and government bodies and has brought his own unique and highly regarded brand of consulting to those he works with. He believes in empowering and educating people on sleep and well-being by providing strategies and procedures that are culturally appropriate and inclusive to ensure the safety of people in the workplace. Adam will share some amazing insights into health, humanity, and happiness. You'll be inspired and you'll most definitely have some aha moments. So get a pen and paper and be ready to write down take-home tips to help you live a life by choice and design. People come into our lives, and at the time we may not know or understand what those people mean to us. And I can tell you that upon meeting Adam, I knew that we would be enjoying a professional, harmonious, and fun working relationship. This is evident in the fact that we have been working together for 20 years. Yes, 2 decades of teamwork, of co-piloting, of growth, goal setting, strategy, management, celebrations, negotiations, and challenges that were all faced with purpose, integrity, and goodwill. Working together for 20 years is quite unique and rare, and it's something that I truly value, and I know that Adam does too. Adam is a deep thinker and observer, and these interviews we cover much ground, going deep as Adam shares his insights and wisdom of his views of the world. As with all great conversations, initially we thought that 1 episode would be adequate. 1 turned into 2 and then to 3. We explored so many themes that I'm actually calling this an epic conversation, a trilogy if you will. Be sure to tune into all 3 episodes. You can connect with Adam on LinkedIn, and I'll pop a link in the show notes. Feel free to share this series of discussions with your family, friends and colleagues. You'll be truly inspired. I'm thrilled to have Adam on the show, and I think you will be too. So, let's get started. Adam, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled to have you here and to have you as a first speaker in 2024 coming on to Business Class Collective podcast. As you know, I enjoy talking about various topics on my podcast, and I interview people who have walked the walk, talked the talk, and have lessons to share, and I'm thrilled to have you here. But I want to have a bit of a background for our audience. You and I have been working together for 20 years. That's 2 decades. And it's remarkable, it's unique, it's rare. And I think our working relationship is based on trust, alignment, and a vision that's bigger than each of us. And that is the success of a business. Through those years, we've gone through all the different iterations of a business and all the different cycles, and we've had wonderful celebrations, we've had tough decisions, we've had difficult conversations, but we've always come out the other end. And I think it's so rare, and I'm very grateful for that journey and sharing that with you. And sometimes, like, just recently I've kind of been thinking about it and thinking, it could be a case study for a successful relationship in the workplace, and what it means when people can connect meaningfully. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
I'll start with a shorter version, and if you need more, let me know. I was brought up on a farm predominantly in Queensland, southeast Queensland in Australia. I went to school and spent a lot of my sort of middle early life in the Barossa Valley in South Australia, which is a wine growing or grape growing and winemaking district for those of the audience who aren't familiar with the Australian wine regions. So I really grew up in the country and had a lot of influence from my mum and dad with those, I think, country values, family, adventure, and really a pretty simple life. We didn't have much money. We had a lot of love and always had great food and good connections and family, but life really was pretty simple. I think, like lots of country kids, my sister Nicole and I thought life was kind of boring. We were always complaining that there wasn't much to do in the country. But as we got older, we realised how just deeply, deeply fortunate we'd been to be able to grow up riding horses, exploring creeks, hanging out with our friends in a safe way. Yeah, just having a really nourishing, wholesome upbringing, really. So, yeah, to move to Adelaide in South Australia to go to university after school was a huge leap, even though it's not a huge city. My subsequent leap after that was to Washington, D.C. in the US to work. So that was a much bigger leap. But at the time, the journey to Adelaide and the time in Adelaide was a big, big eye opener from a boy from the bush. Bush being a term for the country areas in Australia. And yeah, I just was always really keen to learn. I studied science. I got very passionate about learning about the human body systems, focusing on physiology and pharmacology for my first degree. I then came exposed to the physiology of sleep through that, and I got really interested in sleep, which of course then drew me more into the psychological aspect of that, because of course sleep's both very physical and physiological, but it's also very psychological. I had an amazing career as a research scientist, as a consultant working on projects internationally. And yeah, as you well know, because you were part of it, we had incredible adventures all over the world doing research and consulting in, oil and gas rigs across the world, mining camps across the world, airlines, various other types of aviation, emergency services, hospitals and healthcare. And we really had a very clear focus of keeping humans safe in the workplace with a specialty on 24-hour or 24/7 type businesses, particularly ones where the humans were critical to safety and critical to productivity. And yeah, I feel very blessed that we got paid to, yeah, travel around the world and do good work and do worthwhile work. So I think, yeah, I'm very proud of what we achieved, and yeah, still enjoying it to this day.
Adam, it has been a journey, and I was happy to support you through that journey. And I remember when you went to the US and you actually asked if I wanted to work from home, 2005, I think.
Probably the question got asked in 2004, but
Oh.
yeah, that was,
Which was
it would have
unheard
been
of.
early 2005, yeah, when I left.
For that to even be an option. And I think that goes back to the trust of working together and knowing, even on the other side of the world, we could make this happen. So you're a senior research fellow at UniSA. And I remember when I came into my job interview, I thought you might be 80.
I
So I was very surprised that you were 29.
think I was 29, yeah. And you were my first employee really ever, because I had people working for me, but it was all like contract or task based. So yeah, that alone is a pretty big milestone as well.
One of the conversations I remember, we had a client ring up from one of the emergency flights, and that person just needed to talk to someone. And I picked up the phone, and they talked about the risk that they face every single day, saving lives, and what that meant to them when they were at the end of their shift, if then they have to go and respond in an emergency situation. And I think, Adam, like the work that you've done in that field, you've helped a lot of people navigate those precarious situations and keeping people safe so that they go to work and come back to their families.
It's a very unique situation where there's a risk of responding and there's another risk of not responding. And I think it's almost an impossible place to be put, but many people all over the planet every single day get put in that situation. And yeah, it's probably one of the harder nuts to crack. There's certainly ways to think through that problem and, as best as possible, ensure that the right decisions and right procedures and processes are made, and that people don't push themselves further than is safe, even though they feel duty bound to do something. And I think that's one of the trickiest things, because so many of the people, whether they be doctors or paramedics or pilots in these emergency service type situations, like, they do what they do because they care. They do what they do because they're big-hearted people that want to help other people. And yeah, if a call comes in right before they're supposed to finish their already perhaps long and demanding shift, there's a part of them that really wants to go and help because that's the kind of people they are. So to make sure we can support organisations and people to get that balance right and do it safely if it's available to be done safely, but find alternative pathways or sequences or risk management processes if for some reason they're not the right human to be actually participating in the response. I mean, that's definitely one of the most challenging ones, but equally one of the most satisfying ones when you can really get those systems humming so that all of the stakeholders, all of the people are being considered and being kept safe.
Adam, you're 29, you accomplished your PhD, and you were given a Tall Poppy Award and a Governor's Award, which is quite remarkable, all before your 30th birthday. So what did that mean for you? Because you've given us a backdrop. You've come from the country, come to the city, and now you've worked in this field and you've been recognised.
Yeah, I mean, I can reflect more easily on it now. I think at the time, I definitely had a dose of imposter syndrome, which I know is very common with people, perhaps more with younger people. Around the same time, I also was named Young South Australian of the Year in the Australia Day Awards. And yeah, that was certainly a big accolade as well. It felt at the time that there was this imposter syndrome because I knew friends of mine that were, in my mind, they were doing better science than me, or they were better at writing scientific articles than me, or whatever. On reflection, I realised we all had our own unique strengths and limitations. The work that we did and the work that I did in the space of the workplace really was very, very unique at that time. And just picking sleep as a focus was quite a bit of an oddball thing. Now, of course, it's well and truly on everyone's radar, but at the time it was quite unique, and the workplace bit of it was even more unique. I realise now that being able to translate a lot of this quite complex human biology and human psychology into something that was practical and usable for real people in real workplaces all around the world, spanning cultures and time zones and things like that. Like, yeah, that translation capacity, I think, was my unique skill. So I can see that now, but I think at the time, perhaps not. It definitely opened doors. I mean, I got invited to go and do amazing things, to give presentations and be on research review groups for NASA, departments of transport around the world in the US and elsewhere, other renowned institutions like Karolinska Institute in Sweden and other places. So, really did open doors. And locally too, I mean, I got invited to speak at lots of schools, as the Young Australian of the Year for South Australia. I got a lot of invitations to go and speak at schools, including your kids' school, and that was a real honour as well. And I feel like I was quite practical with people. I wasn't idealistic about the pathways that were available to school kids at that time, and I just gave my raw and honest truth. And I got feedback that it was super valuable, because I think schools at that time, and perhaps even now, they're often pushing people sort of towards secondary education and, seeing university as some sort of holy grail at the end of your education. But I saw it differently, and I spoke quite practically about the equal value of skills and information. So, yeah, it did open doors. It was a real journey. I think the doors that were opened led to other doors being opened as well. So I think there was a real domino effect in a lot of ways, and it was definitely a blessing and added to the adventure of where we got known and where I got known, and subsequently where we got invited to go and participate and add value.
And I remember the feedback from my daughter's school and the teacher writing a letter, the principal writing a letter of thanks. It was wonderful. But you've had this amazing career as a specialist in the area of sleep and fatigue risk management. And you've worked across various industries, as you've explained. What are people doing now that they should not be doing? What are the disruptors and the challenges, whether it's hormones or sleep or light?
Yeah, I love that question. The world has changed a lot, in those 20 years. I think the environmental aspects, the environments we work and live in have changed a great deal. There's a lot of emerging research, which is not even yet fully definitive, that I think is going to become quite shocking in years to come, to be really honest. I'm only just getting caught up on some of the more recent research areas of interest that are related to this question in the last couple of years. And I think I'll give you a few examples. I mean, one is the LED lights that we now use predominantly in most of our settings indoors. Because of the energy efficiency drive that we have, we've ended up creating extremely narrow bands of light wavelengths. And that's very unnatural for our brains and all of the related systems from our eyes, optic nerves, etc. We have evolved, at least in this form of human, for a few 100,000 years, but of course there were human species before ours that we came from before that. So let's say a couple of million years. We've evolved with the sun. We've evolved with full spectrum light. And yes, the wavelengths do change across the 24-hour pattern and even across seasons, unless you're at the equator. But that's a foreign change, like a real foreign shock in some ways to our brain and our systems. And I think we're only just starting to cause the problems. And of course, learning about what the problems are and what we can do about them is going to be lagging from that. So I think getting full spectrum light outside is really, really important. If it can be at similar times each day, that's even better, especially the sunrise and sunset times. But even just getting light on our bodies, into our eyes, will become, I think, very important. And just like people thought I was a bit wacky looking into sleep 20 years ago, I think people probably think I'm a bit wacky talking about this sort of stuff now, but it's basic biology, to be honest. It's just not in people's awareness yet. We've also got other layers of environmental things that have changed. I think I got my first mobile phone in about 1996, but it was all very simple and basic back then. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have all these multi-layers of different electromagnetic networks. Now we've got 5G, 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi, multiple gigahertz versions of the Wi-Fi, often in the same area. And if you live in highly dense situations like cities, you're often also getting overlapping Wi-Fi from your neighbours and other things as well. And I think there's a lot of biological effects of these wavelengths. And of course, manufacturers of this technology deny that. They make claims about if it's not a thermal effect, then it's effectively negligible. And there's all these claims, and I just don't believe that to be true. I think we're going to learn very clearly in years and decades to come that these wavelengths are going to be very damaging. And I think we already know that it can affect sleep. We used to see it in the sleep lab. We created Faraday cages around the actual bedrooms because we would get interference coming into the EEG channels from other equipment in the hospital. So, that was a very localized situation. But, we just know that that we're going to have effects on, the brain and the body from these non-native electromagnetic field type networks and pulses. So, I think it's something that we should all be thinking more about. We should be getting more natural light. We should be avoiding blue light at night. We should be turning off our Wi-Fi systems at night, and ideally even just hardwiring your computer rather than constantly being, on Wi-Fi all the time. These are things that are pretty fringe at the moment. But as I said, sleep was considered a fringe topic 20 years ago. So there's certainly some of the things I'm getting interested in, and I see the biological bases for being worried about those things. And I'm certainly making changes in my own life to really minimize the impacts of those things and really just get back and be more balanced with nature, because a lot of these artificial things are biologically effective, but we don't probably even know how bad they are at this point.
Yeah. And there's a huge movement for people to get back into nature, to ground themselves at the beach or in the garden or touching earth, getting out into the sunshine while they're doing that.
Yeah.
That's really important, isn't it?
Absolutely. And even during sleep, I mean, probably for 15 years, I've slept on a grounding or an earthing sheet, which is plugged in to the wall. For those listeners who aren't in Australia we have a 3-pin plug that goes in the wall. We have a positive and negative on the top, and we have an earth or ground that's plugged in, to the earth at the bottom. Our electrical infrastructure is good, so the earthing is actually a really good earth. And so the plug for this earthing sheet that I use on my bed is just the bottom pin. There's no top pins for the positive and negative because it's not charged, of course. It's just an earthing plug. I know in some parts of the world, sometimes earthing and grounding isn't that clean, and you can even get dirty electricity from other wires and other parts of the house kind of entering the earth and potentially into the body or whatever is resting on the earthing or grounding sheet. Certainly in Australia, it's a very good thing to do. And I've been doing that for perhaps 15 years. And I definitely notice a difference. I even have a little zip-up sleeping bag type one that I can travel with, which I can, use with adapters if I'm traveling internationally as well. So, yeah, even those sorts of things while we're sleeping. Obviously, you also, want to not charge your mobile phone next to your head. You want to have it a fair way away from your body. You want to turn your Wi-Fi off at night, as I said, and really just, being very mindful of those sorts of things just to try and minimise or completely eliminate all of the electromagnetic fields while you're sleeping. It's an easy win because there's no inconvenience really. It's a bit harder to say turn all your Wi-Fi's off all the time everywhere, but certainly while you're sleeping, people should be doing that. It's sort of like a drain in a way for things you don't need, and it just helps reduce inflammation, often well below our level of conscious awareness. But certainly lots of people who haven't consistently used earthing or grounding sheets that do start using them for a month or two, especially if they're also getting rid of Wi-Fi's at night and things like that. All of that in combination, often people will find quite remarkable improvements in their sleep, and possibly other ailments as well, like inflammatory related ailments. So it's definitely a worthwhile experiment, in my opinion.
It seems to be inflammation is a huge thing. I think every second person you talk to is feeling inflamed, or they've got hormone disrupting symptoms. We're living in a very different world to, I think, our parents.
There's a lot of things in our food and water systems that are probably related to that as well. We're really only just, again, starting to work out a lot of the negative consequences for humans on having things like Roundup, put all over a lot of the food. If you're not eating organic or biodynamic food, that's very, very disruptive to hormonal systems. It also has other metabolic effects in terms of being able to actually metabolize things to not put on weight, or if you're trying to lose weight, it's interrelated to that as well. And even microplastics. I mean, 20 years ago, we weren't thinking about that, but we certainly know that microplastics in food and water, or even off of, plastic chopping boards, plastic water bottles, there are a lot of sort of phytoestrogen and other estrogenic related compounds that disrupt hormones from those as well. So there's a lot of things, again, that have changed in our environment that are interrelated with the light and the electromagnetic fields and other things, and collectively they layer up to make hormone regulation, metabolic function, immune function, all of those things really are pushing uphill our health inputs in the food system and things like that too. A lot of highly processed, ultra processed foods, seed and nut oils that are pretty foreign to the human body, lots of highly processed sugars that, your body really doesn't know what to do with relative to natural sugars that come in a food matrix, like in fruit or honey and things like that, which are fine. So, yeah, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. They're obviously not all related to sleep, but I think certainly in my career, the more I've spent time, the more you realise it really is one system. Western medicine's great at putting things in tiny little boxes, but ultimately, we're a very complicated organism in an even more complicated system. And so I don't know that it's always the best approach to reduce everything down to these tiny little boxes and getting too far away from the big picture.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Adam. We've got our place on this planet and we're part of it, and we've got our energy and we've got the way that we function, and there's so many disruptors around. And a lot of people are running on cortisol, the stress hormone just pumping through the body, and that's not good, causing inflammation, causing all sorts of things. There's a lot that can be done, right?
That's the thing too. I mean, I always like to try and empower people to give themselves permission to be human because there's no escaping that. And I think there's a certain empowerment that can come from just surrendering to the reality that, yeah, we're all human and we're all different, but there's a lot of similarities as well. So we have to really consciously get off some of these circles of modern life. So, make a priority of sleep. So you don't need so much coffee. So your cortisol's not so hyper stimulated, so that you can sleep better. So you don't need the coffees, and that's a simple circuit, but there's a positive loop on that. And I think the same goes, with a lot of these other things in terms of getting rid of plastics and, hyper processed foods and water that's possibly, got toxins or pesticides and other things in it. You want to be filtering all that stuff out and just not putting it in there in the first place. So I think, yeah, there is a positive loop, and I think we need to give ourselves permission to be human because we are anyway. But yeah, empowering ourselves to just be kind and chip away at it a little bit at a time. It's easy enough just to start with, probably the four big ones being focusing on sleep, focusing on the purity of water and food. I don't know whether that's one or two, could be either. And then just moving your body, ideally including moving your body outside in full spectrum light as well. So there's simple versions of all of those. And then, as that becomes more natural and more part of a daily and weekly routine, then yeah, sure, you can add more complexities and be empowered to take on more. But the pressure shouldn't be to try and drop yourself into the entirety of the complexity to start with, because that can just become overwhelming and then create its own stress, which is obviously, the opposite of ideally what people will be doing.
Counterintuitive. Yeah. Adam, I'm certain you've had some highs and you've had some challenges. So what's been one of your biggest challenges, say, in business?
There's a few that spring to mind. I think the times where I've been caught the most off guard is when an external force, a big external force, has occurred unexpectedly. The global financial crisis was probably our first really, really big one. The COVID crisis was really the other really, really big one. And so to have a global, financially and economically cataclysmic shock effectively come out of nowhere, I think they were the times where I realised I had to just dig deep and really step up and be a leader for the sake of my team, for the sake of our customers, and really all of the stakeholders that we were working with. And I don't really regret it, but I think I realised in hindsight that I was often quite slow to react to our own internal business changes that were required in response to those big things. So, the global financial crisis and the COVID crisis, clearly they weren't going to go away quickly. But I think it took me a while to realise decisively what needed to change in the business because, we had positioned ourselves in those times to be optimistic and be growth focused and work on both delivery of everything we had committed to and planting all the seeds for the futures that we thought were valuable all at the same time. And I feel like we responded somewhat slowly to those, which probably was good for employees, good for contractors, good for customers. But I think as a business owner and as the person who always got paid last, if at all, that was probably something I could have learned a bit better or perhaps implemented a little bit better with no real negative effect on anyone else, but with some positive effect for myself in terms of my own stress, my own sleep, my own health, my own financial risk management. I think that probably is the clearest, biggest one that I'm really clear about now, that we've sort of come clear of both of those.
Yeah, it was a journey. It was a challenge. We got through it. We got through both of them in the best way possible. I really think that your leadership shone through, and that was a great comfort to the entire team and to other stakeholders. I think that's really testament to your leadership, Adam, because you're a student of life, and you're always learning and you're always challenging yourself, and perhaps slow to respond. I don't know, it's probably a bit of caution too. It's probably a bit of caution because of the unknown. We don't know how long these things were going to last for. And I remember soon after that, you gave me the opportunity to take on a course to add more value to the business so that we could be more prepared, I suppose, for anything else that was coming along, because the business then was growing and when we came through that. So, yeah, when you're in the storm, you don't realise how deep you have to dig. And it's only when you reflect that you can see you've probably done it quite well.
Absolutely. And I don't know necessarily that I have any regrets or would do anything differently. I just know that I wouldn't have the spare capacity now that I had and used, in the last couple of decades. I think that's more of a personal acceptance and reflection. I think, a lot of people who go into business years down the track realise they would never have gone into business, had they realised what they were going to have to deal with. And I think I'm probably in that boat too. But I love the journey, and we were very, very fortunate, as I said. And I think that, it was really a matter of conservatism too. I think that we never really overdid our commitments, and I didn't have any business partners, so I didn't have to make things balance out every 12 months. We could have multi-year views of things, and that was great too.
Yeah. Adam, we're going to wrap up now. We're going to do part 2 of this, if you're okay to do that.
Yeah, sure. If you'd like to, I'm happy to.
Because I feel we've only just got started. But
yeah, sure, no problem.
That concludes part 1 of a 3-part series interviewing Dr. Adam Fletcher, a specialist in fatigue risk management and sleep. And make sure you tune into episode 2 coming soon. Until next time. You've been listening to Business Class presented by Eugenia Panterhos, founder of Business Class Collective. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcast, subscribe, rate and review this podcast. Share the love and let your family and friends know too. You can follow Business Class Collective on Instagram and Facebook. Join me next time.